Kate and Lavalja, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Welcome back. We're doing our Saturday book, and we're on video number 4 of The Invisible College by Jacques Vallee. The epic, the storied, the revered Jacques Vallee, who is the prototype, the model for the man in Close Encounters that is at the end of the movie. He's the French scientist who's playing music and dragging the people out of the spaceship, luring them with the music. That was created after Jacques Vallee. Okay, chapter 5, the confrontation. He says, we've encountered a phenomenon that we can't fit into a neat category. And he says it seeks confrontation on its own terms. What are they? What kind of human experience does a close encounter with a UFO constitute? What is it? What are we looking at here? So he says there are 7 kinds of strangeness that he sees revolving around these encounters. UFO, ET, or strange phenomena story. The reports differ. And it's wrong to think that they are giving us the same information. They're all being studied differently by different investigators. There's not a lot of cohesion. You've got officials, you've got the Air Force, the military, you've got law enforcement. They all get reports of lights and objects, flying objects. There are organizations like MUFON and private research groups like SETI. They hear about landings. They hear about ETs. They go off, on their own little jaunts. So therefore, when the military and scientists discuss all of this, they aren't thinking about or talking about the same thing, and they're not thinking of it in the same way. So there's sort of an antagonism because they could be discussing such different reports even. They may not have heard the same information even, or the information they have that they share, they're looking at from very different perspectives. So he says he has a framework to clarify and reconcile the differences, always looking at it from a very scientific point of view. He says the strangest stories don't come from the least reliable sources. They can have extreme reliability and be extremely strange. There are categories of strangeness. So number 1 is you see a flickering light like a firefly, and you just tell a friend. The second kind is you see a flaming object plunging behind a hill, and you call the police because it's dry and you're afraid there's going to be a fire. Or number 3, you see a luminous object with a blue glow plunge behind a hill, like a large circular aircraft with windows, with no wings and no tail, and you think to yourself, is it the Russians? You call the Air Force. Or you see a large disc with lighted portholes rock gently to the ground. It has a hum. It turns and it whistles when it takes off. And you hesitate to call the law enforcement because you don't want the neighbors asking questions. And you hesitate to call the Air Force because of the studies that they've put out debunking recently. Debunking UFOs, you don't want to look like a fool. You don't call them. And then you tell your friend Joe, and he's really into UFOs, and he belongs to a group of people who are into UFOs, and they find out. Or you leave your garage and you run into a tiny person in a silver diving suit with no arms and huge orange eyes, and it walks stiffly away, and it goes to an object behind a hedge which takes off, and you're shocked and frozen into place, and you tell your wife you don't want to go camping on the weekend and you have to tell her why, and you tell her not to tell your mother-in-law. So these family stories that are kept secret out of fear or embarrassment or disbelief or religious reasons too. Or you're lying in bed and you see a light in your yard and your baby starts to cry and you get up to check on the baby and you see a blue object hovering 6 feet away in the bedroom, and the beam of light is beneath it and it hits your face and you start to have strange thoughts and you're frozen in that beam of light and you receive thousands of ideas downloaded all at once into your head, and the whole thing stops and vanishes. So what was that? Was that God? Was that the devil? And you think, if there's life on other planets, is that possible? And you get ideas about God and you wonder about that. And then you have a headache and you take a sleeping pill and everybody goes to sleep. Doesn't talk about it the next day. Or you're driving a truck 50 miles per hour and you suddenly come on a road blocked by a large dark object and some force stops your 15-ton rig you're driving within a few feet of the object, just stops on a dime. And a ring of smoke beneath the craft it's so smoky that you choke on the smoke. And the next thing you know, it's an hour later and you're driving your rig 50 miles an hour, 50 miles to the south of where you started out. You wake up going 50 miles an hour. So he has a chart that he's made with all these categories. It's really interesting. And he estimated the probability of the report, but also to whom the report was made. And he says strange things like strangeness number 4, 5, and 6. You run into the short guy outside in the suit, or you're lying in bed and the light, affects your thoughts, or you see a large lighted object with portholes in the sky. He says those are usually told only to trusted persons because they're so wackadoodle, And I'm not saying I don't believe it. I'm not saying I do believe it. I'm just saying his point is people are really reluctant to talk about this. Now, Dr. Hynek got letters that said, I'm going to tell you about this, but please don't tell the Air Force. Lonnie Zamora, this is the police officer in New Mexico. When he got his backup, when they showed up and the object had gone, the first thing he asked for was a priest. The Hills, when they, Betty and Barney Hill, when they saw the UFO with lights, they told the Air Force about it. When they were abducted by the ETs, they just told a trusted friend. They didn't tell the Air Force that part of the story. So Vallee calls this the hilltop theory because of the shape of the curve of the occurrence of it. Strangeness has been studied by the Invisible College, and they're really into studying the numbers 4, 5, and 6, but Vallee likes to study 6 and 7. He says that the really out there things are the ones that tell him the most. The types of data collected by an investigator depends on how others see him and his beliefs. So people are interpreting their experience through their own beliefs, but they're reporting them based on what they think other people believe. So if you're kind of a religious person, you might be inclined to report something to Paul Wallace, who was a deacon of his church, the Anglican Church, because you know where he's coming from, and he might be more open to a spiritual experience than the guy next door. And that makes sense. That's human nature. And you might assume that scientists can only be given certain information. You can only tell them about things that can be measured, or things that look technological, or things about physics. And Vallee says this creates for the investigator a biased sample. They're not hearing the full story. And the military, of course, they have their own angle. So Vallee says they can all learn more by looking at the different angles of the different phenomena that are reported to all the different receivers of reports. So he's received mixed and often disappointing results from his investigating. He says many witnesses were either lying or making things up or not stable, but he got invited to occult organizations. He has been able to verify that some witnesses' reports did happen. He was able to verify them, but he didn't necessarily have to accept their conclusions, which were jumping to conclusions. So he says he's made contact with scientists who are doing really pioneer work. Nature magazine described our attitude to UFO sightings and reports as bizarre and magical, and I think it's interesting they did an article about this. Scientists of the past would regard satellites and computers in the same way as magical, weird phenomena. And he's got, this is the hilltop theory. Okay. So he says, I think there's a general shifting of man's belief patterns, his entire relationship to the concept of the invisible. It's happening outside of any established structure, and the science is not immune to it. Scientists, where am I going? Okay, the Invisible College, they believe genuine science must move into the unknown domains that are guarded by the words bizarre, magic, ridicule. We must hold a belief that even the weirdest occurrence can eventually be understood. For example, one doctor suggested to Vallee that nonsense statements coming from ETs may be a hypnotic technique. There is actually a technique in some forms of hypnosis called the technique of confusion. And they help to send telepathic messages. They're used to send messages. They're used for healing, these techniques. And it's done because it's effective because the mind is distracted. The mind's searching for meaning, and it's very open to thought and to thought transference, and to psychic healing. So it's a situation where our mind would be intentionally confused. And while we're trying to figure out the confusion, our brains enter a state that leave them open and receptive. And that's an actual scientific fact. I thought that was very interesting. Vallee speculates that there may be some sort of psychic relationship between witnesses and ETs. He has always said that he felt that that's a potential thing. I think, he's writing this originally in the early 70s. I think we have moved from there. I think that's no longer considered weird. He entertains the idea that the mind would be more perceptive with confusion and attempts to understand absurdity. The confusion technique causes mental confusion, and then the subject is eager to get out of the confusion, and therefore it's open to new information, which is called scientifically reframing. This is considered what's called scientifically a second order change. He says it's all about showing the fly the way out of the bottle. He says you can't ignore the similarity between certain UFO encounters and initiation rituals of secret societies. This is all about the opening of the mind to a new set of symbols. It's done by ETs and it's done in occult traditions. Now it's getting interesting, I think. Now we're starting to look from a totally different perspective. There's something afoot. There's something being done here. The confusion, the inconsistency, the absurdity, it's not in and of itself about itself. It's about what it does to our awareness and our ability to learn. The case of Jose Antonio. In May of '69, a Brazilian soldier was out fishing. And he became aware of movement behind him, and he looked and saw a burst of light that hit his legs, and he felt numb and fell to his knees. 2 4-foot-tall, masked guys in dull aluminum suits grabbed him, brought him to upright cylindrical machine, took him into it, gave him a helmet like their own, tied him up. The aircraft took off. He found it harder to breathe. He felt almost paralyzed, very uncomfortable. He felt the journey was interminable. They landed. He was blindfolded and dragged with his knees on the ground. And there was a lot of talking. He was placed on a seat with his eyes uncovered and found himself in a big room. There was a robust, short, hairy guy with long, red, hairy hair, a unibrow and a beard, and large, green, round eyes. About 15 of these entities came in. He saw that there were 4 dead bodies in the room, and the room was made of stone. And he was given a stone glass shaped inside like a pyramid to drink a dark green liquid. I wrote in the margins, Oz. Was he in Oz? There was a bright light, and he saw paintings of animals, vehicles, houses, a racing car. In the corner, he saw an upside-down racing car. This is all confusion and absurdity. They went through his fishing gear, and they took one of everything, like a sample. The leader began a conversation with him only by gestures, and it was about weapons. He felt they wanted his help in dealing with humans, and when he began to say the rosary, they got mad and they grabbed the rosary away from him. Jose had a vision like Christ, kind of a revelation, and he won't tell what it was. Then this whole apparition vanished, and the little short guys blindfolded him. He was transported back to where he'd been before. The ship landed. He fell unconscious. He woke up alone 200 miles away from his fishing spot and discovered that he'd been gone 4.5 days. Now that's documented, that the guy disappeared for 4.5 days. This is his story. It's confusion. It's absurdity. It included a religious experience. What was that all about? So then we're talking about out-of-body experiences. Now, these are like stories from Robert Monroe, who initially studied out-of-body experiences. So he felt during this experience that he was out of his body and fighting with 2 of the small beings in desperation. He was approached by a man in a robe, and the ordeal ended. So it's just very weird. It's hard to describe because the whole description is so confused. I think this might be this is a different guy. This is not Jose, the fisherman soldier. This is another guy, but it's so very similar to Jose's that they kind of conflated them. So the similarities are these, and they coincide with initiation rituals. Candidate is confronted by members of the group wearing special costumes. He's blindfolded, led by the arm through a rough and difficult route, taken into a specially designed chamber that has no windows and is placed in such a way as he can only see part of it, placed in the presence of a master, given a test made to answer questions, shown a variety of symbols designed to remind him of death. The situation suggests that he may not survive the ordeal. He's given ritual food, blindfolded again, and led outside. So the drinking of the cube would be in the relationship, drinking of the liquid in the cube. So all the same elements, or very many of the same elements, between Jose, this businessman that had this similar experience, and in general initiation rituals. Now I'm going to talk about a guy called Paulo Gaetano. In November of 71, 9:30 at night in Brazil, he was driving from his business trip with a Mr. B. The car began giving them problems, and his passenger fell asleep. The car stalled. There was an object 12 feet away that hit the car with a red beam of light. His door opened, and small beings took him into a craft to lie on a small table. They lowered a machine from above like an X-ray machine. They took blood out of his left arm, and he did have a wound there for 3 days. He got shown the plan of a town and a later atomic explosion. He felt heavy. He didn't know how they got home. The friend did not see a UFO. He saw a bus. He says what he saw, this is the passenger, what he saw was Paulo, the driver, getting nervous, pulling over, getting out, falling to the ground. Then the passenger got them on the bus. What bus? And took him to a first aid station. In the same town, Paulo saw that town was the town he saw in these plans that the ET showed him. His passenger wasn't able to explain anything to the law enforcement of all how this happened. So if this is Earth technology, why the confusion? Is it possible that this is a device of social change? Is that the key to these UFO experiences? So that's what we're going to go from here. Are these intentionally confusing and absurd in order to get our minds to open? And is the key for the purpose of this to change our whole entire way of being socially by changing our reality, our awareness? That's all he's asking. Okay. Okay, chapter 6, the winged disc. And we have a quote here from Sir James Fraser from the Golden Bough. In the last analysis, magic, religion, and science are nothing but theories of thought. And as science has supplanted its predecessors, so it may hereafter be itself superseded by some more perfect hypotheses, perhaps by some totally different way of looking at the phenomena, of registering the shadows on the screen, of which we in this generation can form no idea. So, Vallee asks, have these phenomena been with us in one form or another, specific to each time from the beginning? His book, Passport to Magonia, it views folklore from this angle. When we talk about elves and gnomes and leprechauns, are we talking about ETs? His similarities in most cultures from past stories coincide with parts of UFO narratives. The same properties of the UFOs occupy a prominent part of some stories, such as the Wheels of Ezekiel, and we've talked about that often. The flying chariots, the Vimanas, I think they're called, of the legends of India, the round baskets from heaven in American Indian folklore, the flying shields of the Romans, the cloud ships from Magonia of medieval French chronicles, the illuminated flying houses of the Celtic fairy folks. This chapter looks at the possible lessons from these experiences through a lens of possible religious turning point. So, and I think religious, maybe a better choice of words would be spiritual, because, oops, I'm losing something here. religion is fraught with all its differences. So Vallee points out that between the 2nd century BC and the fall of the Roman Empire, intellectual elites of ancient Mediterranean world with the spirit of scientific rationalism, and they were confronted and defeated by an irrational element similar to today's UFO phenomenon that led to a rejection of science. So they were seeing things, led them to a rejection of science. And he takes, for example, Ptolemaeus, the great Alexandrian thinker, who was schooled in the rational. If he was shown the apocalypse, and he wouldn't take it seriously. And the apocalypse came much, the story, the idea, came much longer after Ptolemaeus. But they were more rational then than people descended into. He wouldn't take the apocalypse seriously. He would consider it insanity, as he rejected much superstition of his own time. It would be considered absurd. But what happened in ancient times was this counterculture of the absurd prevailed. It triumphed. And Plato was forgotten for 1,000 years. Is this happening again? Is this what we're going through again? Is there evidence of a huge cultural change in the Middle East? Well, let's look. Talk about Phoenician amulets. The Phoenicians established a series of cities roughly around the Syrian Mediterranean area. They were great seafarers. Their language was close to Hebrew. Their alphabet was the predecessor of Greek and Latin alphabet, and actually the origins of our alphabet. And there's question to believe that it may have actually been derived from an earlier source in Babylonia and Egypt. They were not literary. These were not the guys that wrote stuff down. They were seafarers. They built fantastic ships. They were skilled at dyeing. That doesn't mean not being alive. Cloth dyeing. And they were the ones who developed the dye from a seashell animal, a shellfish in the Mediterranean that was only in one place and very difficult to get, rare to find, few in number, hard to harvest, and then the dye itself was difficult to take out of these seashells. And it was the first true purple dye that was ever invented by humans or discovered by humans. And because it was so rare, so expensive to find and produce, it was reserved for the richest of the rich. And that is why purple is a royal color. This was the Phoenicians. They were quite the people. They were skilled at doing this dyeing. They were skilled at glass making. And one of the things they did that was really respected everywhere they went is they discovered how to do a system of accurate weights. Not much is known about their religion. They know that the names of their gods were influenced by the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Greeks. They would sacrifice their firstborn in times of bad luck or bad stuff going on. They would sacrifice prisoners of war on an altar. And their women went to the temple and gave their virginity to Astarte, the goddess. They wore protective amulets as similar to the Babylonians and Assyrians. They had cylinder seals. So what those were, for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, I feel like I should explain it a little bit. They were tubes, and the whole outside surface of the tube had design, symbols, whatever on it. And you would roll it to leave an impression, either in wet ink or dye or a wet substance that would harden and dry later, like, I don't know, I'll make something up, like Adobe, you would roll it, and this would guarantee that something had not been broken, like wax, a wax seal. Something had not been opened, would guarantee it was not broken, it was sealed shut, and it was the imprint of the important person that it came from, or the business, or the minister, or whatever. So they have these cylinder seals that depict winged discs in the sky with wings, and said that they were meant to carry divine beings. And they were often shown looking kind of Assyrian, like the Syrian gods. And were often presented, these beings who were like godlike, were presented by, like on either side of them, hybrids who had half human, half beak, or half animal, bird bodies. Some depictions on these cylinder seals show priests presenting sacrifices to these discs. And the priests themselves were in garments that had wings on them. So the conventional interpretation in our recent past, up till now, was that these discs are the sun. But he asks the question, he says, begs to be asked, if that's the sun, why are beings emerging out of the sun? Because they depicted often these divine beings coming out of the sun. There's abundance of astronomical symbols in the field of these depictions. So you have the disc with the wings, you have the god, you have the hybrids, but you also have stars and moons and suns and planets all over the place. So we need to ask ourselves, is this disc with wings, this is a flying craft? One of the figures that they have shows lightning bolt coming out of the disc to hit the ground. Many scenes show animals being presented to them, which brings to mind the association of UFOs kidnapping cows and other dogs and cats. And Linda Moulton Howe did a whole book on animal disappearance and mutilation associated with UFOs. And what's really interesting, there's just a ton of documentation of flurries of these sorts of disappearances. Like some area in Montana, suddenly every cat in the county would disappear. I'm making that up, but the disappearance of cats is the real thing. I don't know if it was in Montana, but or in some farming area. All the cows would, not all, but they'd find everywhere. They'd find all these instances of cow mutilation, or people reporting seeing cows being lifted into the air, or horses being experimented on. Very odd things. So in general, these seals show, just pretty much consistently a winged disc, a human in adoration, horned animals being presented to the beings. The beings, some seem human, some have winged garments. They look like they might be worshipers or kings or priests. The gods themselves are coming out of the disc, wearing elaborate headdresses, or if they're not elaborate headdresses, they're extremely fancy hairdos. And there's a weird scorpion-like people that are supporting the disc, smaller than the gods and the men. There are a variety of monsters and hybrids, and the question is, why would Phoenicians enshrine such an event on their seals and not on monuments? I mean, what is going on here? Why depict it as a magical ceremony and not have similarity to Phoenician religion? It's not connected to the religion, but it's connected to it is depicted as an event, a standalone event. Why show it in the context of the larger cosmos? Stars, meteors, moon, sun, planets. Other cultures depict flying discs. The early Christians depicted angels, and angels actually were not messengers. They were souls in the original intention. Then, of course, there's the serpent and the caduceus. The link between ancient symbols and modern UFOs is an interesting link to make. The lettering or design or wording associated with them on the body of these UFOs is often somewhat hieroglyphic like, some often like Arabic writing, astrological signs. What is wrong with this earring is jumping to its demise here. Hang on. I don't know what's going on. It's trying to fly off. Vallee recounts the story of a British woman in 1968 who was in a car and saw a disc in the sky darting about. And after seeing this on the way home, she had a sudden insight into the nature of reality that she knew was connected to the disc. This had a profound effect on her. It actually caused a personality change. She went from an agnostic to being a Gnostic. She said it was like a bolt from the blue. That evening, she saw a strange figure outside and felt frozen in panic. And this figure was like the devil. It had goat-like legs. It was humanoid. It felt malevolent. It had scary eyes. It tried to telepathically communicate with her, but she was too scared. And eventually she unfroze and went inside, but it was gone. In all religions, a beam of light comes from a divine source to a human as a blessing or an inspiration. The paintings of the Virgin Mary, and the light beam comes from the sky, and boom, she's impregnated. This occurs often in UFO encounters. Happened to Uri Geller. I thought that was interesting. Also happens in near-death experiences. Robert Monroe talks about it. So this light hit him, and he said it had the intelligence of a form beyond my comprehension. It came directly down into my head and seemed to be searching every memory in my mind. I was truly frightened because I was powerless to do anything about this intrusion. Again, this happened. This is Robert Monroe. The same impersonal probing, the same power from the same angle. However, this time I received the firm impression that I was inextricably bound by loyalty to this intelligent force, always had been, and I had a job to perform here on Earth. I got the impression of huge pipes, so ancient they were covered with undergrowth and rust. Something like oil was passing through them, but it was a much higher in energy than oil, and vitally needed and valuable elsewhere, the assumption being not on this material planet. And then he reported other stories of it. With an intelligence far beyond my understanding, an impersonal, cold intelligence, with none of the emotions of love or compassion which we respect so much, yet this may be the omnipotence we call God. Visits such as these in mankind's past could well have been the basis for all of our religious beliefs, and our knowledge today could provide no better answers than we could thousands of years in the past. So the question is this a psychic technology? Our space visitors, they don't explain ancient symbolism, but there's an implied technology. Is it psychic and physical? So Vallee is a little bit free associating here in this chapter and asking these questions of us, of himself, of the world. He's just putting it out there. What is this? Chapter 7, A Morphology of Miracles. Now we're getting into Diane Pasulka's book more. What happened at Fatima? And I just wanted to say this is for one of our subscribers here, or one of our fellow viewers, our fellow seekers, whose name, at least, message name is Fatima. And I mentioned to her the other day that this will be very interesting. Anybody who knows the stories of Lourdes and Fatima and Guadalupe and Medjugorje will be interested in this. I'll just say that. Many UFO witnesses claim religious effects. They have religious effects. They have medical things that happen, breakthroughs in thought or understanding. So do we need a change in consciousness to understand what's going on? In 1917, in the Portugal countryside, there were the appearances at Fatima. But that wasn't the beginning. This was preceded by 2 years of UFO sightings. People don't know this. I think this is great. In 1930, the Catholic Church concluded that what happened there was not natural. It was not a collective illusion. 3 illiterate children saw a lady in a bright glow. She did not say she was the Virgin Mary. That's not true. That became apocryphal. She said that she was from the heavens. And she told them she would return every month from May until October on the same day of the month, and then would do a public miracle so that other people would understand that this was really happening, because other people couldn't see what these children could see. So where are we here? The events of Fatima. This is so interesting. They involve luminous spheres, lights with strange colors, a feeling of heat waves, all the physical characteristics commonly associated with UFOs. They include the typical falling leaf motion of the saucer zigzagging through the air. The apparition came down like this, sort of sideways and down like this, fluttering. They also encompass healing, prophecy, a loss of ordinary consciousness on the part of the witnesses, which we have called the psychic component of UFO sightings. In one of the encounters, a prophetic message was given to the children and transmitted by them to the church. A part of that message was not to be revealed until 1960, at which time Pope John the 23rd opened the sealed envelope but did not publish the secret. Some indirect information on the circumstances of this opening of the message, which Vallee has obtained, sheds light on the reactions of high church officials to the prophecy, if not on its actual contents. But let us now take the events in sequence, the pattern of prophecy. So now keep in mind that 2 years before this, so starting in 1915, they were starting to see objects, UFOs. May 13th, 1917, these children were out tending sheep, I believe. And I think this is really interesting. This is something I had never heard before. They saw a bright flash, and they went to hide in a place called the Cave of St. Irene, which was an ancient, sacred, holy place. And interestingly, St. Irene is the goddess of peace. I thought that was significant. It just gave me the goosebumps when I heard that. They saw a little woman, and that's how they described her, as a little woman, entered this sacred place. And she was a blinding light. And she said she'd come every day on the 13th from May to October. So the second appearance was June 13th. And about 50 people showed up because they went home and told their parents, and their parents were like rolling their eyes, you know. But enough people heard the rumors and came to check it out. And the children knelt and spoke to nothing that the crowd could see or hear. All the crowd could hear was a buzz. And a buzz is often reported when UFOs appear. Then they all saw an explosion and a small cloud formed over a top of a tree, a short tree, where the rest of the manifestations would happen, they were told. The 13th of July, 4,500 people showed up. Now you have to understand, this is in the middle of family fields where they graze their animals and grow food. And it's in the middle of nowhere, Portugal. 4,500 people showed up. They heard a buzzing, a humming sound, a decrease in the sun's glow and heat. A small whitish cloud appeared above the tree, and a loud noise at the lady's departure. The children were shown a vision of hell that terrified them and were given a specific prophecy announcing more apparitions of unknown lights in the sky. They were told this: the war is going to end, but if people do not stop offending God, another and worse one will begin during the reign of Pius XI. He died in 1939. When you see a night illuminated by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign that God is giving you, that he is going to punish the world for its crimes by means of war, famine, and persecution of the Church and of the Holy Father. To prevent this, I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia. If they heed my requests, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world. That seems timely. On August 13th, I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud, 18,000 people showed up. There was a clash of thunder, a bright light, a small whitish cloud formed around the tree, and it hovered for a few minutes, then it rose and melted away. The clouds in the sky had turned crimson red and changed to pink, yellow, and blue. Colored light like a rainbow on the ground was the description. Clouds around the sun reflecting different colors on the people. Such are some of the terms the witnesses used to describe it. And these are 18,000 witnesses. The witnesses saw falling flowers. The famous phenomenon of angel hair so consistently reported after the passage of the UFO, and sometimes interpreted as an ionization effect. One man, Manuel Pedro Marto, reported seeing clearly a luminous globe spinning through the clouds. And then they give you the Portuguese, and I won't torture everybody with that. In a statement he made under oath during the canonical inquiry concerning the signs of August 13th, 1917. August 19th, the children were tending sheep, and the sun got cool. The temperature got cool. The sun faded. Rainbow colors appeared everywhere. There was a bright flash and a glowing light, and the children saw the lady in a white glowing light. And there was a roaring sound, and she was saying, make sacrifices for sinners. Now, this is kind of out of order, out of date, but that's what happened. I think it happened like this because on the 13th, the children were not allowed to show up. Now I'm remembering the story. They were not allowed to show up. By the 19th, they were out of confinement. They put them in jail. They tried to intimidate them to shut them up. 18,000 people on these fields were destroying the area around this village. And they had trouble with crowd control. So the authorities, the church authorities and the civil authorities, they arrested them and didn't let them show up for this apparition. So that color and the rainbow and all that stuff I just read to you, all of that was done without the children being there. But 6 days later, on the 19th, the kids were back tending their sheep, and an apparition happened again. Apparitions of a flying globe. On September 13th, 30,000 people showed up. 2 priests came as representatives from the Vatican. They came as skeptics. They came to prove that this was false. At noon, the sun got dimmer, although no clouds were seen in the sky. Thousands cried, "There she is, look." A globe of light was seen by all, advancing slowly down the valley from east to west toward the children. It came to rest on the tree. A white cloud formed, and out of the empty sky, shiny white petals began to fall. Let us ponder this description of the phenomenon by a witness. This is a quote. As the people stare at the strange sight, they soon notice the falling, glistening globules, contrary to the laws of perspective, grow smaller and smaller as they got closer. And when they reach out their hands and hats to catch them, they find they have somehow melted away. The children saw the entity again in the center of the globe, and the dialogue began once more between the lady and Lucia. The promise of the miracle on October 13th was repeated. Then the radiant globe rose and disappeared into the sun. Asked what he thought the globe was, one of the priests, now quite shaken, stated that it was a heavenly vehicle carrying the Mother of God from her throne above to this forbidden wasteland. The concept of the earth as a prison or a forbidden wasteland is decidedly a popular one among those who have been exposed to these phenomena. The last apparition, as predicted, took place on October 13th. 70,000 people showed up. 70 people showed up. The vision was preceded by a flash of light at noon, a sweet, strange fragrance. The children engaged in dialogue with the lady. The crowd did not hear the conversation and saw no lady. They did observe the dramatic changes on the faces of the 3 children, enraptured by their vision. The predicted miracle took place as the apparition left the Cova de Iria. This is the cave of Irene. The rain that had been pouring down on the crowd suddenly stopped, and the heavy clouds parted. The sun appeared as a disk of brilliant silver, a weird disk that turned rapidly on its own axis and cast soft beams of colored light in all directions. Shafts of red light shot out from the rim of the sun and colored the clouds, the earth, the trees, the people. Then shafts of violet, of blue, of yellow, and of other colors followed in succession. These colors have been described as monochromatic sectors, and they were definitely revolving. The reports speak of a flat disk rather than a globe. After a while, it stopped spinning and plunged downward in zigzag features toward the earth and the horrified spectators. Most witnesses believed that their last hour had come. Most of them began publicly confessing their sins. That might have been interesting. Finally, the disk reverted its motion, disappeared into the sun, the real sun, once again fixed and dazzling in the sky. The final miracle had come at the culmination of a precise series of apparitions combined with contacts and messages that place it very clearly in the perspective of UFO phenomenon. Not only was a flying disc or globe consistently involved, but its motions, its falling leaf trajectory, its light effects, thunderclaps, buzzing sound, strange fragrance, the fall of angel hair that dissolves upon reaching the ground, the heat wave associated with the close approach of the disc, all of these are constant parameters of UFO sightings everywhere. So are the paralysis, amnesia, conversions, and healings that people felt. And I am going to stop here because I don't think I can get through the next section, and I don't like to interrupt the narrative. So this is the end of video number 4. That's a little something to process. I've always been fascinated by these visitations and always felt that there was something to them, that we weren't really hearing the full story. Well, really enjoying Vallee's perspective and the whole conflation, the idea that there's a connection between modern day UFO sightings and ancient chariots of the gods, as Eric von Daniken talked about. Isn't that an interesting synchronicity? And in between, religious experiences and fairies who steal babies in the middle of the night and that kind of thing. There's a thread that brings all those things together. And Vallee wants to know, what is that thread? What is the purpose? And that's how the book proceeds moving forward. We're going to be talking about potentially what this could mean. So I hope you're enjoying this. I think this book is fascinating. I love the work of Jacques Vallee because he is willing to entertain mythology and religious experience and folklore without becoming a cultist all in. He retains his objectivity. I love it. And I think that's the direction science is going and our understanding of these things is going. I think there's a lot of experimental physicists who would agree. So thank you very much for watching. I truly appreciate it. And I hope you'll be back for the rest of the book. And in the meantime, Slongerfoil, Slàinte.